Hello everyone and welcome to the second episode in my React for Beginners tutorial series. Now in this video, we're going to be going over the basics of JSX and React in general. Now, if you don't remember from the previous episode, JSX is basically, but not completely, HTML in JavaScript, or HTML in React at least. Now the syntax differs a tiny bit, but for the most part, it is mostly HTML in JavaScript. Now, we're going to be leaving off or picking up where we left off in the previous episode. I figured out the issue. Note that if you are on Windows and you are running WSL like I am, use your Linux file system. Instead of using /mnt/c/users, /mnt/mount, aka /c users, will actually be using your Windows file system. But as you know, WSL is actually slow on the Windows file system. So that was the reason why the startup was taking forever in the previous episode. So use either the tilde like that or /home/ whatever you named your user, and put your React code inside that. That way it's in your Linux file system on your Windows computer so that it's much faster. So I'm going to go ahead and go and CD into my tutorial app, which I created in the last episode. Then I will be doing a simple npm run start. And actually, I'm going to have to do an npm install since I just copied over the entirety of my YouTube folder here. So this will actually take a minute to install all of the React packages again. Imagine I'm rerunning create React app in a sense here. So this will take a similar amount of time. But in the meantime, in this episode, we are going to be going over at least the app component and actually starting to dissect and create and rewrite some of the JSX in our website. And we might be going over and making our own component depending on the time. I'm just going to keep an eye on that. So as we left off, go ahead and open up the app.js file. I'm going to go ahead and close this so we have more space. And you'll see this is the syntax. So you'll see we have a const app is equal to an arrow function. And that is the gist of React in general. It is based on components. Now, essentially, the React component hierarchy, just so I can get a visual to help us with this, you'll see, imagine you have an app component. Everything in React is a component for the most part. So let me just run npm run start just so I can let that load up. But everything is a component in React, and you'll see this will be much quicker, including app itself. App is the root component of the website. So you have the app component, and the app component helps render either HTML or other components, because every component in React can either render another component or a collection of others and some HTML. So you'll see right here, this const app is just a variable, as you can see with this syntax. And the variable is actually a function, since we're setting into an arrow function. And that function just returns this, which is called JSX. Now, as you can see, this line here is pretty much basic. It's just vanilla HTML. It's just div. You'll see there's a tiny difference here where we're saying class name equals app. The reason why we have to use class name instead of class as we would in HTML is because class is a reserved keyword in JavaScript. We can't use that anywhere else. So instead we have to use class name. And then here we have image source. And then you'll see this is another discrepancy here. There are brackets instead of kind of quotes like there normally would be. And as I hinted in the previous episode, we can actually edit this HTML directly in line using JavaScript. And the way we do that is by including brackets, which will basically allow us to dynamically change this image's source. So if we change the image here in JavaScript, it'll change on the website itself, which is pretty cool. And again, we have the class name and all that. Then here we have a paragraph here that just says edit and blah, blah, blah. And then we have a link that just says when React. Now, if I open up our React app, you'll see we have the image. It's spinning because of some other code. Then we have that edit, this whole paragraph here. And then we have the link just like that. So you'll see our website is directly reflected by this component. Everything in our website right now is defined right here. And then we are simply exporting it using JavaScript export syntax, which is just the way that we can import it in here in index.js. This is the heart of our website where we're actually importing React, all of the React library. And then you'll see this line here, we're just importing app from this file here. So if we export it here, and then we import it here, and we render it like this. And this is how you actually render another component in React. You simply put it as if it was regular HTML, and you put the name of the component, and then you do the closing bracket, which is this is part of HTML or XHTML, like the strict HTML. But so yeah, just get used to this syntax. If there's no closing tag, then you just put a slash at the end of it. So this is how we're actually loading our website. Now, as you can see, if I go ahead and delete the header, for example, and I save, you'll see that everything disappears. And if I keep the header and I remove all of this here and I reload, you'll see we have this nice little background, which we'll keep just so it's a little easier on the eyes. But you'll see just by editing this JSX, I can actually change the contents of our website. So to start off, let's go ahead and just write some basic HTML, just get used to it. So again, we have this const app, and then it's returning our layout. Now, one thing that you do have to note is JSX cannot return two separate HTML elements. This is another difference between JSX and regular HTML. So if I say hello, it'll just say hello right there. But if I put a second H1 like that, saying H1 like that, and then I say goodbye with a regular, oh, you'll see there's already errors and it's giving us a problem. The reason for that is JSX actually needs to have one kind of root element. So simply if we wrap both of these inside a div of some kind and we just let that format, notice now it is letting us render. So that is one difference. Uh, you cannot just let things render with several root elements. There has to be only one root element, which in this case is our div with the class name of app, and we get this. So inside our header, let's just go ahead and just, write some basic HTML just so that we get used to the fact that this is HTML. So hello world, exclamation, boom, we get that it's centered because of the styling. Notice there's an app.css here, and you'll see it actually gets imported into our JavaScript. And by running this line here, all of this CSS gets activated in our website. It's as simple as just importing it in our JavaScript, and it is applicable in our website just like that. So I'm going to go ahead and keep that. So hello world, we get all of that. So that is the app component. Again, just a quick dissection. We are importing all of our styles and our logo, which we no longer need. Actually, we can go ahead and just delete this line here. And the whole thing works fine still. And then you just create your component or function. Function, you'll notice actually in the previous episode, it looks like this. I much prefer, and it is generally a standard in the space, the React space, to just use arrow functions because they look a lot cleaner. I have actually never in production grade React code seen actual use of the word function, um, at least in my company, which I worked at a startup. So it was much, we were equipped with much newer practices, but generally always use arrow functions instead of regular. It's just a matter of preference technically, but it is a common style that is followed by many in the industry. So again, we just create this variable, set it equal to a function. The function itself is just returning our website, and then we export it. It's as simple as that. And this is the base kind of code in order to render our stuff. Now, if we actually want to create another component, that's slightly more complicated, or not slightly more complicated, but it's slightly more code than just editing. So let's go ahead and get to that. And that'll be where I leave off in this episode. If you are at all confused, don't be too confused because more of it will get cleared up as you continue on this tutorial series. But again, just at the core, you need to remember that React is a component hierarchy. You have the app component, like this. This is the app component right here. It takes care generally of your entire website. And then you can render other components, which can render other components. Like, for example, this is like some sort of portfolio. So this app renders an intro component, which is just like talking about yourself, and then a skills component. And then the skills component has a list component where it lists different skill items, stuff like that. It allows us to modularize our website so that in order to add a new section, we just create a new component. It's as simple as that. We don't have to restructure the entire website. So we'll see that in action right now. So in order to create a new component, you just hit new file, and then let's just say my component .js. So this is the file naming syntax. You just have a fully not camel case because everything is capital. For every new word, including the first word, you just use a capital letter. That's the naming case. And then you do .js, and simple, you import, or you don't actually have to import anything from this. You can just say const my component is equal to arrow function, and then export default my component. Now, actually, I don't remember if uh, I don't remember, so I'm going to quickly, before I say this on this video, should I import React in every component? Because I was taught to do this. Okay, yeah. So normally, I learned React before these function components existed. Before you actually had to do something like this, class my component. And in fact, some old legacy code and some new code that requires the very, very obscure differences between a class and a function component requires you to use a class instead of a function. But overall, might dive a little bit into it. I might make a short video on it. But overall, this is not used almost never in modern React. Sometimes, again, there are a couple tiny things that function components that can't do, that class components that can, but I have never run into one of those cases, and I've worked on many different applications. So generally, you won't need to do this. But before we had class components, you actually had to extend like react.component. So you actually had to import React in every single component file. You don't have to do that anymore. But if you do want, you can still go import React or import React from React. But you don't have to do that anymore. So I won't teach that to you if it's not necessary. And again, we just do a const my component is equal to our arrow function. We do an export default. And in this thing, we just return some JSX. So make sure to use the parentheses if you're going to return a multi-line thing. And then we'll just do a h1 or even, so let's show a practical example. So let's do a div and then let's do an h1. This is my component. And then P, it can have multiple items. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. And we're going to come here in app. Second line, we're going to simply do an import my or dot slash, which is just command line syntax. Dot slash means this folder, and then my component, just like that. And then it's as simple as doing this. You'll see we have our header, hello world, and then we just do a normal HTML tag with my component space / close. Simple as that. Except I forgot to, oh, my bad. So yeah, import my component from my component, my bad. So you actually have to do a default import like this, little syntax issue. My component is not defined, my component from dot slash my component. And then like that, export default. Sorry, I might have made a small syntactic mistake. So I'm gonna go ahead and debug right here. Like this. Oh, there we go. Okay. So yeah, you'll see there's a tiny, I see the difference. My bad. I confused myself there, but I'm gonna put this inside our header. That way we see it. So what happened there is it was just a little confusion for React. So I just simply had to reload the website in order to fix all the confusion. But in essence, here in our my component, we're just creating the component. We're exporting it like that. Then here in app, we are just importing it with a default import. And if you're not familiar, just look up JavaScript default import. All it means is you're going import my component from my component instead of, you have to have this section my component from just because of the way default imports work. And then here in our app, we just render it like so. We just put a HTML tags and then we say my component in the middle, and you'll see that it renders just like that. And the beauty of components, of course, are that we can render many of them like this. Now imagine you had a list with different items and you wanted to apply uniform styling, or you had very complex relations between components. This can become very useful. And this is one of the most fundamental ideas of React. Now, you may be wondering what's the use of this. There are something called props, like name equals or this prop equals, where you can actually send data to your components so that they can render different data. I'm not going to get into that in this episode. That'll be reserved for the next episode. But this is just scratching the very surface of components, and I hope you get a tiny feel for the way React kind of is syntactically structured like this. So go ahead and play around with this code here. Of course, you can check it out in my GitHub, which is linked below in the description. It just says that all my code, and you can come to the front end and then the React folder. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to talk about in this episode. If you want to see more videos like this, check out my playlist linked in the description. I'm uploading every 2 days currently. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.